Good day, I'm Doug Hunter. I currently work for Cispro, a local ERP company that sells software globally. But my experiences I'm going to tell you about today are from my background. So just to let you know where I come from, I'm an industrial engineer, a nice logical person in theory. I've worked in manufacturing or related to manufacturing all my life, which is getting longer. In the UK and South Africa, specifically in heavy engineering, typically supplying people like Eskom, yes, before the bad days. And I've run and helped run some other smaller production companies, also in South Africa and in the UK. I've been a user on the user side of implementing business IT solutions or manufacturing solutions. I've worked as the vendor or the supplier of IT, implementing solutions with customers, and I've even been a salesperson, consultant, and I've been in a leadership role in a global IT organization as well. I'm going to take you through a number of things. It's really just my experience to make you, many of you, if you've ever touched any IT, you'll certainly resonate with many of these thoughts, but I think some of you might not have thought about it. But if you want to make your implementation of IT in a manufacturing supply chain environment work, these are some of the things you need to think of. So industry, it does make a difference, which industry you're in. And we don't all do the same things. We do similar things, but they really can be quite different, although they're like taking sales orders. It's very different in different industries. And business processes, that's really what information systems are about. These need to be at least appropriate. Is it best practices? Well, some people call them best practices, but at the very least, they need to be good processes, not what you've done for 50 years and we do it that way. You've got to have an open mind because that's what you're going to spend the money on, is enabling those business processes. Maturity is not just for older people. It's really your experience, or your people's experience and management experience of using IT. If you've never used it before, you're going to have a different experience to somebody who's implemented 3 or 4 systems. And that's something people forget about. Your appetite, it's like all of us. Our appetite is often greater than our stomach can take. And I think you've got to be realistic about your ability to apply technology. Everyone wants to do everything in one go. That's not always the way to do it. And the selection of software. What do you do? Do you go to 20 people? Do you go to 1 person? Well, I've got some thoughts on that. It's also early in the process, and it's really important that you do a fair job of selection, that you expose yourself to the right number of companies, but not thousands, because, well, let's talk about that later. And these are projects. You always implement, or as I'm doing at the moment, helping companies improve what they're doing. It's always a project, so you must treat it as a project. And is it progressive recovery? So we're doing stuff, but we want to do it better. Or is it open heart surgery? You know, are you starting from nothing and you're completely changing your business? So the project basics are the same, but there are very different results to how you run it. And then focus and priority, the wood from the trees, the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves. Beware of being sold the sexy stuff when it's absolutely irrelevant, but know why you're being showed the sexy stuff. And but let your, if you're talking to vendors or you're talking to your own people, make sure you've decided what your focus is and what the priorities are in which area. Don't be led astray. If you need help, get it. But it's incredibly important that you share the priorities of your business to the people you're dealing with. And success, to me, is realizing value at a fair or affordable price. If you have to spend more than the company's worth to put your IT in, you might be using the wrong people. If it's really cheap, it might be an Excel spreadsheet. Is that appropriate or isn't it? Well, you have to decide. So, first things first, industry. Well, there are different strokes for different folks. I've just taken this as an example. If you're a manufacturer, or your distribution center, then you've got a retail store. Those are actually 3 businesses in the same supply chain. But the manufacturer is going to be focusing more on medium-term forecasts and make to stock and then sell from stock. The Unilevers, the Rhodes Foods, those sort of people. The distribution center is actually feeding stores. So it's being supplied from the left, and then it's going downstream to the stores. And there it's more about replenishment. There's not so much time to think about it. It's almost daily. So the emphasis is on short-term forecasts, not medium-term, and rapid replenishment. And those are different. They might even be different tools. They might be specialized tools. And when you go down to the bottom there, service parts or MRO, maintenance, repairs and operations, you've got a mix of very fast movers and some that move once a year. So there's a mixture there of forecasting the fast movers and then deciding what is your inventory policy for the slow movers, because forecasting won't help. So although you're doing the same things in all those businesses, you're kind of in different industries. I know this is all retail, but in the end of the day, each of those businesses will be implementing IT in different ways. And then there's business processes. So you really need to, if you're going to do your implementation of, let's say, an enterprise resource planning system, it's going to look at all your products, it's going to help you plan them, it's going to help you do your procurement, it's going to help enable your sales order entry, your financials, the whole thing, the manufacturing, the works. So you've got to document these things. You can't just say, well, this is somewhere we do this and we do that. No, that doesn't work. If you're going to automate it with IT or enable it with IT, you really have to start thinking about your processes. So this is just the MRP process, not going to go through in detail, but you get input from sales and forecasts. You then plan the demand and you say, well, I'll make a master schedule. If you don't understand this stuff, it doesn't actually matter. But it just shows that there's a step. We do rough cut capacity planning. The next thing we do, we run this thing called material requirements planning, which is just a big algorithm, a mathematical algorithm that balances supply and demand. So it says, if I need so many finished goods on a certain day or a certain week, I look at my stock and see if I've got any. And then if I haven't got them, I decide to make them. It schedules what I should make according to a whole pile of rules like order quantities, batch sizes, whatever. Then it says, well, if it's a finished goods, do I have any of the raw materials in stock? Yes, I've got some, but I haven't got them all. So it'll arrange orders there, and it might say, well, you've got too many orders, cancel them. So in the end of the day, it will suggest actions to the people to do stuff. So what it does, it replaces what maybe 20, 30 years ago took 100 people. Any MRP or ERP system will do this. It's fundamental. But you might do it slightly differently in your business to the guys down the road. So no good just saying, do MRP, which is what this is, it's do it the way I do it. And if you're got the right people with you, they will tell you, have you thought about doing it this way in your industry? That's really one of the tips you have to think about is, it's not just a vanilla process. It's not the same process everywhere. And it's not all about technology. I think that's probably the most important point. You start with business processes. That's what your business is about. So what you have to think about is, why am I putting IT in here? Well, I'm trying to enable my business to be more efficient, to allow the people to do the things that will add more value to the processes, which should take costs out of my business, which should add margin to my business, which should give me a return. And it also gives me more money to improve my physical processes, like my warehouses or my factories, and buy the right type of equipment. So it's critical that the business processes are where you start. Then the people. Well, if your people are not properly trained and they don't understand the processes and they really don't care, you got the wrong people on the team. So that's the first thing. If you're going to put IT in, you don't need IT specialists. You need people who understand your business and the processes. And they maybe need a bit of refreshing on how these processes should work, because they might, when you're implementing new IT, they might actually be quite different to what you had. So it's essential that the ideal is that you have people who are happy at their job, capable of their job, and motivated to do it, which sounds ideal, but that's what you're looking for. And then the technology. It's enabling transaction processing for people who do transactions, like taking purchase orders, receiving stock, taking sales orders, shipping stuff. Those are transactions. And it gives you control and visibility of those. And then you've got the decision-making stuff, which let's say the more senior resources or managers will use. which is how's my business doing, what are the financials looking like, how's our stock holding, what's it worth, all that sort of stuff to help make decisions, strategic maybe, and a sort of, I suppose, management decision making. The bottom line is that it enables you or highlights it gives you visibility, it lets you control the business, and if it's not going well, it really points you in the right direction of remedial action. And if you are going to re-implement or implement technology, you need a business and an IT architecture roadmap. So the business is, this is where my business is going. How do I enable it? When do I enable it? You might do it in phases. Do the first things first, the next things. You might not do it all at the same time. But if you're going to do it in phases, make sure what you do in the first phase doesn't exclude something that you might need to have done that would help the second phase. So that's why you look much further ahead than maybe the next quarter or year or two. You look ahead, it may change, but at least you're more likely to make use of IT in a progressive way more effectively. Not random actions. Random actions, typically one guy says, I need this for my bit, let's optimize procurement. And he makes it so complicated to do procurement, you never buy anything, so you can't make anything, so you lose all your customer service. So very careful roadmap. So digestion. We all like food. Digestion's about your maturity, not your age, as I said. It's about where you are in the sort of knowledge side of how you do your business. Now, everyone knows how they do business, but external people, like your customers and suppliers, are worth a chat. They might even know how you do your business and say, have you thought of this, have you thought of that? You might not speak to your competitors, but you've got to be realistic. Are you in touch or do you need help? Be honest about how cool you are at running the business. Am I doing it the right way, or are there better things I should have read about or know about? And processes, they're not based on what you did, they're on what you should be doing. You know, that you're not replacing the old, and you're not necessarily completely renovating it, because there will be good stuff, but you're trying to work out what you should do. Then there's appetite. So the volume, is there too much on the plate? You might be hungry, but if you try and do too much at the one time, you can't eat it all. So if your company is not able to digest what you think you would like to do, you have to be careful, because it won't work. If you're a sort of company that takes things steadily, then that's how you should consume IT. Don't try and change the world in a day. Complexity. Are you used to the meal, or is it a radical change to your menu? Have you eaten oysters? Have you eaten, I don't know, mapani worms? Have you eaten things that you thought were creepy and horrible? You know, there are going to be things that you think, I don't like this stuff. So you must be careful. How complex do you need to go? And you might not be the best people to make that decision. So you might need help here as well. Again, it's about trying to get what you should be doing in a sensible route. And then the diet. Are you a super competitive company in a very competitive environment? So are you training to survive, or are you training to lead the race? So how you put your IT in, it might be that we're just not making money enough, we've got to fix a few things. That's your sort of survival. But if you are already surviving and you want to beat the rest, then you've got to look at IT amongst other things in a different way. And why would you do that? Look at the technology. So over the years, you know, I think most people know Excel. Some of you may even remember Lotus. You go through material requirements planning, which is MRP, manufacturing resource planning, which is MRP2, ERP, which you add financials and a few things. Then there's advanced planning and demand forecasting. Next thing might be business intelligence, business analytics, corporate performance management, artificial intelligence, and machine learning these days, and then autonomous everything one day. Of course, IT, the software industry always gets blamed for talking the future, but you have to, because most companies don't progress on applying IT as fast as the software companies have to do to develop it. But once they've developed it, or even while they're developing it, they're still trying to create a market out there for these bits of functionality. which the early adopters will take. Not everybody will do them. But if you're going for an IT company, you do want to see an IT company that's up to date with the technology that's going on. Most are, but not all are. So there's, don't worry about there being a lot more that you can do. You should sort of keep in touch if you're going to spend a few million putting some software in, but companies don't typically implement it as fast as the software companies produce it. Don't worry about that. So it can look like this. The content doesn't matter. It's about the maturity again. If you think being to the right of this slide is like, you know, you're an athlete in this business, you're using all the most sophisticated software around, the most sophisticated processes, and you want to go for this. The problem is if that's where you are, it's a hell of a gap, and you're maybe being too ambitious or unrealistic about where you are. It's a very important slide. You don't have to do everything. Do what's right. Then you've got to select a software organization, so the vendor or the supplier. You need to do some research. Have a look at the internet. It's always a good way to see what people say. They might all say the same things, but you know, at least see what they say. What do they focus on? Do they focus on your type of business, your industry, whatever it is? Check with your suppliers. They might actually know a lot of companies and trusted friends. But if you're well enough known, I think, you've probably been approached by software companies anyway. And the type, do you go for a big or a small company? Do you go for a back-end system, which typically that's what people would call their ERP system, their basic sort of supply chain and inventory management and financials and manufacturing, or specialized? Do you go for turbocharged planning or specialized warehouse management because you're a retailer with a monstrous warehouse with 500 people? So it's a different business to being a manufacturer who's got 10 people in a storeroom basically with the finished goods. You might get away with the smaller warehousing in an ERP system, but if you're Pick and Pay, Spar, Macro, ShopRite, etc., you're going to need a decent full-blown warehousing package integrated to the other thing. And then the number of vendors. You could find 25 if you research it. But if you include 25, you've got to thin them down quickly. Because if you get 25 people to spend a day demoing to do a pile of work, they all know you're not focused yet. So try and stick to 3 or maybe 5 vendors. Because if you make them all jump through the hurdles, they're going to think you don't know what you're doing. You have to do some work yourself to work out who's on the short list. Okay. It's a real mistake to get 20 companies to present to you, because I would think 15 would be non-starters anyway, and they know it, even if you don't. Then there's the process of selection. Scope. You must document it. You can't just say, well, this is the business where we do a bit of that and we do some of this. First of all, the guy you speak to, or lady, may not actually pick that up. Plus, you might not tell them everything. Plus, you probably won't tell them what's important. So you have to document it. And you can get help to do that, but document your requirements in each area. Get people in your organization to do it. Being cognizant of the fact that you might be documenting what you do, so you also want to document, well, here's where we have problems. You may not know the solution, but here's where we have problems, and these are things if we could do, we would do. That's the type of thing you want to document. And then indicate where the priorities are. If there's like 40 different things you want to do, try and give some idea to the software vendors of the priorities. That will help them as well. Look and see, demo what matters. You know, any ERP systems, a lot of them do much the same stuff, but there will be certain areas they will differentiate each other. That's what you need to match, are the areas they focus on or differentiate in, is that what you need? Is it important to you? If it's not such a problem. Another way to do it is visit a customer or two, and my tip here is don't necessarily visit the customer that the supplier or the vendor says you should go to. Maybe ask them who their worst customer is and go and see them. Because I tell you, if you go to the worst customer, you're going to get an honest story about when what hit the fan. Because it's going to, if you've got software, at one point in your life, the poo's going to hit the fan. And you want to know how these people are going to react. And I can tell you they don't all react the same way. So to me, looking at a pet customer from from the vendors recommends is fine, because people typically will tell you their feelings about the software, and you're not going there to see, does the software work? You're going there to see, does this customer trust this company, use its software for the things they're supposed to? Are their users happy? Is it a nice fit? Whatever. You're not going to go through a 4-day visit to see how many transactions they do. But it's also good to go ask them what trouble they've had and how it was handled. That's a really key thing, because the software industry, unfortunately, is known for great sales and sometimes not such good service. We all try our best, but it doesn't always work. And the choice, it's not just best at what is important, but the team you're going to work with. You've got to see the team that's going to help you implement, because you're going to be in the trench together with these people. So it's not just about the software, it's about the people that come with the software to help you. Project process. So let's look at the project. Startup. Who's on the team? What are the resources you need? What are their different roles? So we talk about super users, for example. They're the guys that or process owners, they own maybe the manufacturing. And whether there's 10 or 20 or 50 people in manufacturing, that guy or lady is responsible for getting a consensus on what is required for that area, and then will probably be trained in the software and train them. So you create a project team, not of the whole company, but people who represent different areas of the business. And don't make the mistake of picking the guy that's got nothing to do. You want the busy guy. You want the guy that knows what's going on, because they always say, if you want something done, pick a busy guy. So there you go. You've got to define roles, easy to do. You've got project managers, people on the project. You need a project plan, and of course, if you've got resources you're going to use, are they part-time or full-time? Wonderful if you can get full-time people taking out their work on the project, but highly unlikely. But they need to have enough time to do the work on the project. And you've got to have a plan, and you need someone to manage that plan. During the project, you probably get weekly project meetings and monthly steerco meetings. So the more senior guys, executives, they're there to unblock any hurdles, like disagreements, whatever. And project teams get together to see how the progress is going, have discussions, and different areas probably will meet with different areas, so you make sure you're all coordinated. And always have formal change approval, because even if you scope a project the best you can, typically something will change on the way through it. If it's small, the software company probably won't charge you, but if it's a big change, they will, and they'll quote you, and you have to approve it. So you have to take very great care about scope changes. That's why it's important to document up front. You want to avoid as many scope changes as possible, but they will happen. And then you've got to highlight risks. This is the project manager's job. Highlight risks and find out how you're going to alleviate or get rid of them, or cover them at least, mitigate against them. And towards the end of anything, a milestone in the project, because typically projects are made of 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, 4 steps, you've got to get formal sign-off from each milestone before you go through. It's great to say it's all okay. I've been through this myself, and then you get to the end and the guy says, but this isn't working. You've got to make sure you get sign-off, and formal sign-off, and the project handover. Payment. My tip here would be, you're typically going to have milestones in a project plan. Try and match the payment to the milestones. The hours that the software company or their consultant spend is not your issue. Typically, you're going to be told it's 100,000 Rand. If the software vendor spends 20 hours or 2,000 hours, it's probable that in another part of the project where he says it'll be 50 hours, he spends 1,000 hours. So there's ups and downs. You do not want the vendor to bill you for the hours they do, because they could sit in your office doing nothing and bill you. So be very careful of getting payment on milestones, and beware of too much billing against the hours that were spent. They're very difficult to reconcile. And focus on priority. The vendor's relevance, target. Are you in their target? Are they pointing their gun at you? Are you a sort of company that they want? Like, are you in the food business, or are you in automotive components? And that's what they focus on. If you're one of those, that's good news. You might not be, but at least know what their target is. Skill. Do they understand your business or your industry? They won't understand the specifics or the idiosyncrasies of your business, But you want them to empathize with the specific priorities in your business and be able to discuss it with you so they get to know your business, because they're going to try and help your business. And trust. They've got to be in the trench with you and feel your pain. If they stand looking in saying, do this, do that, do this, do that, then they're not the right people. They've got to share the pain. You're on a journey together. I could explain in the economy, there's a lot of stuff around the world, there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment, and you can see when people work together properly, they make great change. And that's really what this is for you. And functionality, most companies, software companies, the basics are all there. And so you want to see are the basics all okay, and ease of use, do they suit your company? The real stuff is your priorities, the tough stuff. Does it help where you really need it? That's what you've got to look for. That's where you'll be making your decisions. And the cool stuff. You've got to have confidence that that cool stuff might one day be relevant to you. That company is keeping in pace with other software companies. You're not on a dying horse, you see what I mean? You're not racing on a dying horse. So you will get the smoke and mirrors and the really cool stuff. You've got to see it, but beware. It's not always what you need now, but you need to know software companies are looking at it. Will they grow with you? That's the bottom line. And at last, how do you make your project successful? Well, do you get a return on investment? Quite hard to work out sometimes, but you should at the very least get a return on expectation. So you should have had some KPIs. The main areas we want to improve things by this much. We want to reduce our stock by this much. We want to make our delivery performance or our customer service not 50%, but 85 or 90% or higher. And the KPIs that are in your priorities, the ones that differentiate, the differentiators for your work, that's what you should be looking for. Cost versus value. It isn't about price. You should have got that out the way at the start. If the guys are going to cost you 10 times what you can afford, you're in the wrong ballgame. So, is the project on budget, including some of the scope changes, etc., etc.? Is it on time, including the fact that you all went on holiday for a month and it extended a month? Is it reasonably on budget, on time, but mostly is it releasing the value you expected? That, to me, is what it's about. And the expectation, you got at least what you expected, not less. Ideally, you get more, and usually you will, but it's not always the software vendor's responsibility to make sure you're getting what you want, because if you don't articulate at the start of this whole process what you need and what you expect, you may not get it, because at the end you've got a different expectation. So be careful, set the expectation, agree it up front with the vendor, make sure they know your priorities, make sure they know there's a key date that you've got to do things, etc., and meet that or exceed that expectation. And the other thing is people, every user should be using the system well at the end and feeling good about it, not cutting their wrists. And you should be wanting to do more, continuous improvement. First 3 months after you go live on new stuff, don't touch it, unless it's really critical that you have to do something. Just list it. And after 3 months, you've got a nice list that says, okay, do these still matter? You'll find that 50% of them don't. So the list is now smaller. But it's a good basis to plan the next phase. And that's the way you should go forward. Just beware of constant change. If you're constantly changing, no one will get used to it. It'll never settle in, and people will hate your system. And they'll blame you. And they should. And that's my story for today. So I like cars. You might not know what these are, but they're Porsches for those of you that might not recognize them. The one on the right is the first ever Porsche, and it's in the Porsche Museum in Stuttgart. As I said, I work with CISPRO, and we don't, unfortunately, Porsche isn't our client, but we deal with a lot of automotive supply companies all over Africa. We deal with food companies, food and beverage companies all over Africa. And that's just CISPRO Africa. I'm part of CISPRO Africa. I mean, we do this globally. But food and beverage, automotive components, but our focus is on manufacturing, companies that manufacture and distribute products. So we've got a number of engineering companies that make things, you'd be surprised, from medium-sized to heavy. We've got automotive suppliers, I think I've said that, electronics companies. So we focus on companies where there is a focus on manufacturing, or at the very least quite complex distribution, typically the sort of branch type distribution, so a steel company that's distributing steel, mostly suppliers to the grocery retailers, all that stuff, food, booze business, breweries, wine estates. We've got a lot of different companies. We've been around since, we're actually the second oldest ERP system in the world after another one which I won't explain, but you could guess. 1978, so I think that makes us 44 years now. It was written in South Africa. It's still done in South Africa, but we have thousands of customers all over the world. And very interesting for me is that the customers we deal with, we deal from top to bottom, because they are not the huge major corporations. They're typically entrepreneurial companies. I suppose you'd call them mid-market, but that doesn't mean they're small in Africa or Asia or even in America. These companies are the foundation of economies and extremely good to deal with. And I think for CISPRO, that's partly our competitive advantage. Look, we've got good software. We've got good people. We understand the industries we work in. But our customers, we learn from them every day. And I think we're definitely in the trench. So I hope this has helped you. You can call me. You can phone CISPRO. We're always there. Putting IT in, especially in an environment where there's a supply chain like manufacturing and distribution, is not for the faint-hearted. And lots of people have done it. You can learn from us all. So I wish you luck. Thank you for your time.